So, hello and welcome back to another evening with Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And after we finish that, Through the Looking Glass, because this is a 2-for-1 deal, because the book that I got has them both. So, that's kind of cool. So, in the last chapter, the first chapter, we learned that Alice is a very impulsive and easily bored little girl. I think she has ADD. I can sympathize with that. I think I have ADD. I mean, I would say probably, if you look at my channel, you would probably say this is the channel of someone with ADD, and it's probably true. Not that it really matters anymore. I'm in my 50s. I think I've learned mostly how to cope with it, but Alice definitely seems to be easily bored and has minimal impulse control. I don't know that I would just pick up stuff randomly that says eat or drink me and follow along with it like, yeah, I'm going to eat that. But we wouldn't have the story if Alice did have better impulse control. I'm enjoying it so far, though. It's a strange thing to say on the first chapter, but so far I'm enjoying it because I like fantastical, like fantasy type stuff anyway. So I'm curious to see what we are going to get up to in the next chapter or two. Not sure. We'll either do 1 or 2 chapters a night. We'll see where we are at for time. But we are going to begin tonight with Chapter 2 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, and that is titled The Pool of Tears. "Curiouser and curiouser," cried Alice. She was so much surprised that for the moment she quite forgot how to speak good English. "Now I'm opening out like the largest telescope that ever was. Goodbye, feet." I didn't remember her growing, but she did finish off the cake in the last chapter. For when she looked down at her feet, they seemed to be almost out of sight, they were getting so far away. "Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for you now, dear. I'm sure I shan't be able to. I shall be a great deal too far off to trouble myself about you. You must manage it the best way that you can. But I must be kind to them," thought Alice, "or perhaps they won't walk the way I want them to go. Let me see. I'll give them a new pair of boots every Christmas." And then she went on planning to herself how she would manage it. "They must go by the carrier," she thought. "And how funny it'll seem, sending presents to your own feet, and how odd the directions will look. Alice's right foot, Esquire, hearth rug, near the fender, with all of my love." Oh dear, what nonsense I'm talking. Just at this moment, her head struck against the roof of the hall. In fact, she was now rather more than 9 feet high, and she at once took up the little golden key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice. It was as much as she could do, lying down on one side, to look through into the garden with one eye, but to get through was more hopeless than ever. She sat down and began crying again. "You ought to be ashamed of yourself," said Alice. "A great girl like you, to go on crying this way. Stop this moment, I tell you." But she went on all the same, shedding gallons of tears until there was a large pool around her about 4 inches deep, reaching halfway down the hall. After a little bit, she heard a pattering of feet in the distance, and she quickly dried her eyes to see what was coming. It was the White Rabbit, returning splendidly dressed with a pair of white gloves in one hand and a large fan in the other. He came trotting along in a great hurry, muttering to himself as he came, "Ah, the Duchess! The Duchess! Oh, won't she be savage if I've kept her waiting?" Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask help of anyone, so when the rabbit came near her, she began, in a low, timid voice, "If you please, sir, The rabbit jumped violently, dropped his white gloves and his fan, and scurried away into the darkness as fast as he could go. Alice took up the fan and the gloves, and as the hall was very hot, she kept fanning herself all the time she went on talking. Oh, dear, dear, how queer everything is today. And yesterday, things went on just as usual. I wonder if I've changed in the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little different, but if I'm not sure, the next question is, who in the world am I? Oh, that's the great puzzle. And she began thinking over all of the children she knew of the same age as herself to see if she could have been changed for any of them. I'm sure I'm not Ada, she said, for her hair goes in such long ringlets, and mine doesn't go in ringlets at all. And I'm sure I can't be Mabel, for I know all sorts of things, and she knows so very little. Besides, she is she, and I am I, and oh, how puzzling everything is. I'll try if I know all the things I used to know. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12. And 4 times 6 is 13, and 4 times 7 is, oh dear, I shall never get to 20 at that rate. However, the multiplication table just doesn't signify. Let's try geography. London is the capital of Paris, and Paris is the capital of Rome, and Rome, no, that's all wrong, I'm certain. I must have been turned into Mabel. I'll try and say, how doth the little... And she crossed her hands on her lap as though she were saying lessons and began to repeat, but her voice sounded hoarse and strange, and the words didn't come the way they used to. How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail, and pour the waters of the Nile upon every golden scale? How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly spreads his claws, and welcomes little fishes in with gently smiling jaws. I'm sure those are the right words, said poor Alice, and her eyes filled with tears again as she went on. I must be Mabel after all, and I shall have to go live in that poky little house and have next to no toys to play with, and oh, ever so many lessons to learn. No, I've made up my mind about it. If I'm Mabel, I'm staying down here. It'll be no use putting their heads down and saying, come up again, dear. I shall only look up and say, who am I then? Tell me first, and then, if I like being that person, I'll come up, and if not, I'll stay down here till I'm somebody else. But oh dear, said Alice with a sudden burst of tears, I do wish they would put their heads down. I'm so very tired of being all alone here. As she said this, she looked down at her hands and was surprised to see that she had put on one of the rabbit's little white gloves while she was talking. How did I do that? She thought. I must be getting small again. And we have a picture. Then she got up and went over to the table to measure herself by, and found that, as nearly as she could guess, she was now about 2 feet high and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that the cause of this was the fan she was holding, and she dropped it quickly just in time to save herself from shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape, said Alice, quite frightened at the sudden change, but very glad to be able to find herself still in existence. And now for the garden. And she ran off with all speed back to the little door, but alas, the door was shut again, and the little golden key was lying on the glass table the same as before, and things are worse than ever now, thought poor Alice, for I never was so small as this before, never, and I declare it's just too bad that it is. As she said these words, her foot slipped, and another minute went by, and splash, she was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was that she had somehow fallen into the sea, And in that case, I can get back home by rail, she told herself. Alice had been to the seaside once in her life and had come to the general conclusion that wherever you go on the English coast, you find a number of bathing machines in the sea, some children digging in the sand with wooden spades, and then a row of lodging houses, and behind those a railway station. However, she soon made out that she was in the pool of tears that she had wept when she was 9 feet tall. I wish I hadn't cried so much, said Alice as she swam around trying to find her way out. I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in my own tears. That will be a queer thing, to be sure. But everything is queer today. Just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little ways off, and she swam nearer to find out what it was. At first she thought it must be a walrus or a hippopotamus, but then she remembered how small she was now, and she soon made out that it was only a mouse that had slipped in like herself. Would it be of any use, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think it very likely that it can talk. At any rate, there's no harm in trying. And so she said, Oh, Mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I'm very tired of swimming about here. Oh, Mouse! Alice thought that this must be the right way of speaking to a mouse. She had never done such a thing before, but she remembered having seen in her brother's Latin grammar, a mouse of a mouse, to a mouse, oh mouse. The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively, and it seemed to her to wink one of its little eyes, but it said nothing. And we have more pictures. We have Alice in her pool of tears and Alice and the mouse. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, Alice thought. I dare say it's a French mouse, come over with William the Conqueror. For with all of her knowledge of history, Alice had no very clear notion of how long ago anything had ever happened. So she began again. Où est ma chatte? Which was the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver all over with fright. Oh, I beg your pardon, said Alice quickly, afraid she had hurt the animal's feelings. I quite forgot that you don't like cats. Not like cats, cried the mouse in a shrill, passionate voice. Would you like cats if you were me? Well, perhaps not, said Alice in a soothing tone. Don't be angry about it. And yet I wish I could show you our cat Dinah. I think that you'd take a fancy to cats if you could just see her. She's such a dear, quiet little thing. Alice kept talking, half to herself, as she swam lazily around the pool. And she sits purring so nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face, and she's such a nice, soft thing, and she's such a capital one for catching mice. Oh, I'm sorry, Alice said again, for this time the mouse was bristling all over, and she felt certain it must be offended. We won't talk about her any more if you'd rather not. We indeed, cried the mouse, who was trembling down to the tip of its tail. As if I would talk about such a subject. Our family always hated cats. Nasty, low, vulgar things. Don't let me hear that name again. Oh, I won't, said Alice, in a great hurry to change the subject. Are you fond of dogs? The mouse did not answer, and so Alice went on eagerly. There is such a nice little dog near our house. I should like to show you. A bright-eyed little terrier, you know. Oh, with such long curly brown hair. And it'll fetch things when you throw them, and it'll sit up and beg for its dinner and all sorts of things. I can't remember half of it. And it belongs to a farmer, you know, and he says that it's so useful it's worth £100. He says that it kills all the rats and... Oh, dear, said Alice. I'm afraid I've offended it again. for now the mouse was swimming away from her as quickly as it could, and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. So Alice called softly, "Mouse dear, do come back again, and we won't talk about cats or dogs either if you don't like them." When the mouse heard this, it turned around and swam slowly back to her. Its face was quite pale, with passion, Alice thought, and it said in a low, trembling voice, "Let us get to the shore, and then I'll tell you my history, and you'll understand why it is that I hate cats and dogs." It was high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There was a duck and a dodo and a lory and an eaglet and several other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the lot of them went to the shore. And that is the end of chapter 2, which was quite a silly chapter. I like it, though. I like all of the nonsense. I'm going to grab a drink, and we are going to read one more chapter of Alice in Wonderland. Be right back. You know, I really have to wonder. I know that this is probably all supposed to be a dream that Alice is having when she fell asleep by the lake. But I also have to wonder just what was in that cake and that drink that tasted like turkey and cherries. Not a combo I would put together, and pineapple. Because I'm thinking it's a little bit of that wacky juice that they used to give to everybody back in the 1800s that was made of poppies. But we're going to move on to Chapter 3 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, titled A Caucus-Race and a Long Tail. And we have an illustration. I like the owl. They were indeed a queer-looking party that assembled on the bank. The birds with draggled feathers, the animals with their fur clinging close to them, and all dripping wet, cross, and uncomfortable. The first question was how to get dry again. They had a consultation about this, and after a few minutes, it seemed quite natural to Alice to find herself talking familiarly with them, as if she had known them all of her life. Indeed, she had quite a long argument with the lory, who finally turned sulky and would only say, "I'm no older than you, and must know better." And this Alice would not allow, without knowing how old it was, and as the lory positively refused to tell its age, there was just no more to be said. At last the mouse, who seemed to be a person of some authority among them, called out, "Sit down, all of you, and listen to me. I'll soon make you dry enough." And they all sat down at once, in a large ring, with the mouse in the middle. Alice kept her eyes anxiously fixed on it, for she felt sure that she would catch a bad cold if she didn't get dry quite soon. "Ahem," said the mouse with an important air. "Are you all ready? This is the driest thing I know. Silence all around, if you please. William the Conqueror, whose cause was favored by the Pope, was soon submitted to by the English, who wanted leaders and had been of late much accustomed to usurping and conquest. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria." "Ugh," said the lory with a shiver. "I beg your pardon," said the mouse, frowning but politely. "Did you speak?" "Aye," said the lory quickly. "I thought you did," said the mouse. "I proceed. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria, declared for him, and even Steggan, the patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable." "Found what?" said the duck. "Found it," said the mouse crossly. "Of course you know what it means." I know what it means well enough. When I find a thing, said the duck, it's generally a frog or a worm. The question is, what did the archbishop find? The mouse did not notice this question, but quickly went on. Found it advisable to go with Edgar Athing to meet William and offer him the crown. William's conduct at first was moderate, but the insolence of his Normans. How are you getting on now, my dear? Said the mouse, turning to Alice. As wet as ever, said Alice in a melancholy tone. It doesn't seem to me dry at all. In that case, said the dodo solemnly, raising its feet, I move that the meeting adjourn for the immediate adoption of more energetic remedies. Speak English, said the eaglet. I don't know the meaning of half those long words, and what's more, I don't believe that you do either. And the eaglet bent down its head to hide a smile, and some of the other birds tittered. What I was going to say, said the dodo in an offended tone, was that the best thing to get us dry would be a caucus race. What is a caucus race? Said Alice. Not that she much wanted to know, but the dodo had paused as if it thought somebody should speak, and no one else seemed inclined to say anything. Why, said the dodo, the best way to explain it is to do it. And, as you might want to try the thing yourself some winter day, I will tell you how the dodo managed it. First, it marked out a race course in a sort of circle. The exact shape doesn't matter, it said. And then all of the party were placed along the course here and there. There was no 1, 2, 3 and away, but they began running whenever they liked and stopped whenever they liked, so it was not easy to know when the race was over. However, when they had been running half an hour or so and were quite dry again, the dodo suddenly called out, Race is over. And they all crowded around it, panting and asking, Who won? This question the dodo could not answer without a great deal of thought, and it stood for a long time with one finger pressed upon its forehead, the position in which you usually see Shakespeare in his pictures. Well, the rest of them waited in silence. At last the dodo said, Everybody has won, and must all have prizes. But who's giving the prizes? Came a chorus of voices. She is, of course, said the dodo, pointing at Alice with one finger, and the whole party at once crowded around, calling out, Prizes! Alice had no idea what to do, but in despair she put her hand in her pocket and pulled out a box of comfits. Luckily, the salt water hadn't gotten into it, and handed them out as prizes. There was exactly one apiece all around. But she must have a prize herself, you know, said the mouse. Picture time. Of course, said the dodo gravely. What else have you got in your pocket? It said, turning to Alice. Only a thimble, said Alice sadly. Hand it over, said the dodo. Then they all crowded round her once more, while the dodo solemnly presented the thimble, saying, We beg your acceptance of this elegant thimble. And when it finished this short speech, everyone cheered. Alice thought the whole thing was absurd, but they all looked so grave that she didn't dare laugh, and as she could think of nothing to say, she simply bowed, took the thimble, and tried to look as solemn as she could. The next thing to do was eat the comfits. This caused a bit of noise and confusion, as the large birds complained that they couldn't taste theirs, and the small ones choked and had to be patted on the back. However, it was over at last, and they sat down again in a ring and begged the mouse to tell them something else. You promised to tell me your history, you know," said Alice, "and why it is that you hate C and D," she added in a whisper, half afraid to offend it again. "Mine is a long and sad tale," said the mouse, turning to Alice with a sigh. "It is a long tale, certainly," said Alice, looking down with wonder at the mouse's tail. "But why do you call it sad?" And she kept on puzzling about it while the mouse was speaking, so that her idea of the tale was something like this. "Fury said to a mouse that he met in the house, 'Let us both go to law. I will prosecute you. Come, I'll take no denial. We must have a trial, for really this morning I've nothing to do,' said the mouse to the cur. 'Such a trial, dear sir, with no jury or judge would be wasting our breath.' 'I'll be judge, I'll be jury,' said cunning old Fury. 'I'll try the whole case and condemn you to death.'" And boy, oh boy, did those words get smaller as I read down this mouse's tale. "You're not listening," said the mouse to Alice. "What are you thinking of?" I beg your pardon," said Alice. "You had gotten to the fifth bend, I think?" "I had not," said the mouse. "A not?" said Alice, always ready to make herself useful, looking around. "Oh, do help me help undo it." "I shall do nothing of the sort," said the mouse, getting up and walking away. "You insult me talking such nonsense." "I didn't mean it," said Alice, "but you're so easily offended, you know." The mouse only growled in reply. "Please come back and finish your story," called Alice, and all of the rest joined in the chorus of, "Yes, please do." But the mouse only shook its head impatiently and walked a little faster. "What a pity it didn't stay," said the Lory, as soon as the mouse was out of sight. And an old crab took the opportunity of telling her daughter, "Ah, my dear, let this be a lesson to you never to lose your temper." "Hold your tongue, Ma," said the young crab a bit snappishly. "You're enough to try the patience of an oyster." "I wish I had Dinah here. I know I do," said Alice out loud, to no one in particular. She'd soon get the mouse back. "And who is Dinah, if I might venture to ask that question?" said the Lory. Alice said eagerly, for she was always ready to talk about her pet. "Dinah's our cat. And I think she's such a capital cat for catching mice that you just don't even know. And oh, I wish you could see her after the birds. Why, she'll eat a little bird as soon as I look at it." This speech caused a remarkable sensation amongst the party. Some of the birds hurried off at once. One old magpie began wrapping itself up very carefully, saying, "I really must be getting home. The night air doesn't suit my throat." And the canary called out in a high voice to its children, "Come away, my dears. It's high time you were all in bed." On various pretexts, they all moved off, and Alice was soon left alone. "I wish I hadn't mentioned Dinah," she said to herself. "Nobody seems to like her down here, and I'm sure she's the best cat in all the world. Oh, my dear Dinah, I wonder if I'll ever see you again." And here, poor Alice began to cry again, for she felt very lonely and low-spirited. In a little while, however, she heard a little pattering of footsteps in the distance, and she looked up eagerly, half hoping that the mouse had changed its mind and was coming back to finish its story. And that is the end of our second chapter. I like this book. It's nonsense, but it's nonsense in the best way, and I appreciate that. really have to wonder. I might have to see if I can find the Disney version or any version to see, because I've never seen any other adaptations of Alice in Wonderland either. Unless you're talking about, I do remember in one of the animes that I was watching when I was probably in my late 20s, that they had a sort of Alice in Wonderland subplot line, but I don't feel like it really followed the book. Speaking of things that didn't follow the book, I am also curious if we find a public domain version of Alice in Wonderland. When we finish it, we will definitely watch that. I had so much fun the other night watching 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, even if the only thing that matched the book was the name of the movie and the fact that it had a guy named Captain Nemo, because nothing else even came close to the book. But it was a good time, and hopefully I can find a public domain version of Alice when we finish this. I was sent a link of something that was Alice in Wonderland, but I watched it and it turned out to be a "Don't do drugs, kid" PSA, which I can see why they would do that. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that double chapter. Probably do another two next time. I don't know how often Aaron will be guest starring in this book. Possibly on the weekends, but he's been working, so he's got a little bit more to do than sit around and read chapters for me now. But I will definitely get him to do chapters whenever I can, because I would like to get his commentary on this as well. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Please do hit the thumbs up on your way out. It does always make me smile. And I will see you next time.